Hey everyone, so happy to see you again. What makes a successful innovation leader? Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live. I'm Mazor Kario, innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And today, I have Angelique Plu. Hey, I was okay.
Yeah.
Innovation expert, initiator of Innovation Lab and ING, and today owner of Explore More. Great to see you, Angelique.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure we're going to have a very nice talk. We already talked in the past and it was very interesting. So I'm sure that everybody else will be interested. So let's start with you. You conducted a research not long ago about the challenges that innovation leader has facing like this day in the COVID crisis. So could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this was right before the summer, and I was just talking to a lot of people in my network, and heard so many different stories about the impact of COVID-19 on corporate innovation. That I just wanted to, yeah, I'm a curious person, so just wanted to find out. So, what is actually happening? And someone in my network from WeWork Labs was actually thinking of the same question. So we just teamed up and also then involved a strategizer and the Erasmus University, where I'm also connected to co-create a research and basically just get a lot of insights from corporates on what is actually the impact. So we managed to find 60 companies that wanted to work with us and to share their situation and also what their challenges were. So which is really interesting to find out what's actually happening today. So so we have I can share a bit on the insights that we found. So I think if you look at so we asked questions like, okay, so what are your major challenges, for instance, in this time of crisis? And the number one challenge that they were mentioning was about budgets. So what they noticed a lot is that a lot of the budgets in innovation were cut. And of course, they were struggling with that. And another one is also then the motivation aspect of the people working in innovation within their organization was also, like a big challenge for them. We also found opportunities, actually. So it's not only challenges, right? It's also, there were also opportunities that we found. For instance, what a lot of people mentioned is that this crisis is speeding up the digital transformation of their organization, or all of a sudden there is actually a need for innovation just because the pressure that's on the organization. So I think that's also, you could say like I wouldn't say a good thing, because of course in a crisis like this with so many horrible things happening, there is no such thing as a good thing, but there is like an impact that can also then help to speed up your innovation activities.
Sure.
So there's quite still a mix. I mean, that is what we found, but quite interesting to also
Yeah,
see
it's interesting.
the
So do
outside.
you think that the motivation is related to the fact that they're working differently, the unknowns, the reductions in budgets, the cuts, or what would be the reason for them to be less motivated?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things. Indeed, as you mentioned, the fact that the innovation budgets were just less budget. So basically teams, for instance, were stopped literally, and their innovation initiatives were stopped. And that's, of course, not very nice if you're in one of those teams. But also what I, for instance, saw is that what a lot of people said is that there is an impact on the ambitions. So, for instance, we saw quite a few organizations that were looking more into, let's say, short-term incremental innovations. And of course, there are a lot of people working in the innovation area who are of course, okay with working on incremental innovation, but get really, really excited when they are allowed to think a little bit more long term, and also really to then create, I don't know, complete different business models that don't exist today. And what we saw is that there was, not for all the companies, but for quite a few of them, there was a shift towards more short term compared to long term. And I think that is also one of the factors. And another one that was mentioned, and that's of course not only for people working in innovation, but basically for everyone, is that they were really missing the, let's say, interpersonal contact. In general, I would say people working in innovation are outgoing by nature. And that, in combination with social distancing and having to work from home, also wasn't always helping. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So one of the things we said we should discuss is what are the skills and capabilities needed for change makers, and we started talking about the fact that they want to look long term, they want to be creative and influential, and they are outgoing, and they love to co-create things. So other than the fact that we already discussed some of it, what will be like the main skills that a change maker or innovation leader needs?
Yeah, so I think one very important one is curiosity. I think that is really key just curiosity in terms of new opportunities, but also curiosity in terms of what can I learn myself, and being very open, and maybe even being very not afraid to say I don't know or I don't understand. So really very much in a learning mode, I would say. That is something that I also recognize with a lot of the people that I work with in innovation, that's a very important skill. Challenging the status quo. I think that is also just don't be afraid to challenge yourself, to challenge others, to think 5 times why, 10 times why are we doing what we're doing, and are we doing it in the right way, or is there a way to do that better? So I think that drive is really important. And I think another one, if you're looking at corporate innovation and installing innovation in a context, in the context of a corporate, is also the understanding that innovation in itself is a system, and that there's all parts in the system that need to come together to make change and innovation happen. So that it's about people, it's about your processes, and of course, being a master in design thinking, lean startup methodologies, and really understanding it, and also being able to not only apply it yourself, but also help others to apply that. I think that is really key in innovation as well.
And do you see like any change after so many years inside ING? Then now you're outside your consulting firms. What would be like the difference between being an in-house than going from the outside?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me personally, I've always felt an entrepreneur, also when I was working in ING. So the things that I was mentioning, like challenging the status quo, or being, trying to get better all the time. I mean, that's those skills I was also applying when I was in ING. But I think when I started my own company, I think what is really different for me personally is that you do have a different role when you are helping organizations to get better. And since you are, let's say, independent, everything that you say and do is still more seen from the context of yourself and yourself as a person, and not where you are in this big organization. And I think that is really different, because that's always, that's everyone knows large corporates, they do have politics. So when you are in this team, that no matter, even if you say, okay, I'm not a, let's say, political person myself, what you see and what you do is seen from that context. And
Right.
being independent, gives me the opportunity to be even more bold sometimes, even more challenging. And that's an honest opinion that people
Yeah.
also see in that way. So I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, I
And
totally
then I
understand.
like to be independent. So that's, yeah.
Yeah. So which is very, I have to say, when we talked like last time and you told me that after so many years you decided to leave this like huge giant corporate, I was very proud of you, because I think that the going from here to there is not that
Yeah.
obvious. Most people will be,
Yeah.
as you said, you're more curious, and I think that curious is like the opposite side of fear. When
Yeah.
you're fearing, so you're not sure what will be, and you say, okay, I better stay where I am. And we talk about fear in the context of a company, but it's the same with people. When leaders are fearful, they will not move. And
Exactly.
when you have the mindset that you want to grow, so growth mindset and seeing like what's ahead of you, you can do it better. So for sure, you're an entrepreneur in that sense, for sure. So what
Yeah.
are the biggest challenges that you think like leaders as themselves face today, not within the context of a company, but for them? What will be like the big challenge?
So I think for leaders, for themselves, if you look at that in the context of innovation, what I notice a lot is that people who work, let's say, in senior management positions in organizations and basically have to facilitate change or innovation within their organization, they need to be ambidextrous leaders, meaning that they need to be able to manage the short term and the long term successfully at the same time. That is, of course, one of the biggest challenges within innovation in general, for organizations and as well for people. And everyone working in innovation, we've all read the books, right, about ambidextrous organizations, and that the ones that are able to do this successfully, these are the winners in the end. But I think, I mean, for senior leaders, it is a struggle, and it's an everyday struggle sometimes to, having to shift from steering the core of your organization, and then sometimes within the course of one day, think differently and look at an innovation initiative that needs completely different approach compared to steering what you're doing in the
Yeah,
core. And I think
right.
that is something that is really challenging, and not also not every leader is always able to do that. But I've also learned, and that's interesting, that if sometimes leaders also aren't aware of it. So if you make them aware, and if you help them with taking, those kinds of steps and taking a different approach, you can also really make a lot of progress there.
Right. It's like holding the tense between the present and the future, and you need
Yeah.
to hold both sides and understand both sides and act in these both, like one is the vision and one is the current core of what you
Yes.
have, which is
Yeah, and especially, I mean, and that challenge is there in the market for all big corporations, especially if they're listed. There is a lot of stakeholders, right? And they also look at those organizations and their activities and where they invest their money, for instance.
right.
So I think that pressure is also there, and especially, of course, for senior leaders to find the right balance between managing the core of today, making sure your company survives, right? There's also a lot of people depending on that for their daily jobs, but at the same time, be successful and also focus on the future. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like splitting yourself into two. One is like
Yeah.
currently what you see, and you need to handle that and to do it
Yeah.
really well. And like it's something else thinking what you could have or what could be the future of the company, or
Yeah.
it's a challenge. So
Yeah.
what would be like the tips and practices you provide change maker and innovation leaders today?
Yeah, so I think one of the, maybe it's nice to, so I have an example of, for instance, one of the projects that I did in Eneco, energy company in the Netherlands. What we did there, for instance, is that we were really looking at this topic of senior leadership, and then also made it very practical for the senior leaders. So we were really, and of course they didn't have that much time. We're really explaining all the principles around how to work in innovation, and how the innovation processes work, and how how they were, the innovation team of Eneco was working with stage gates and things like that, and then what kind of decisions were there. And then we were really focusing, okay, so what kind of questions can you ask, your innovation teams? How can you help them? And we made it very, very practical just by using specific use cases of the company and actual project that they had. So really co-created that together with the innovation team to then also give some practical insights for managers on how they could behave, or what kind of questions they could ask to really empower those teams to be more successful. So I think that is one of, so asking the right questions in the right time is something that's, I think, really important.
And what is like the most surprising thing you learned about innovation through these years?
So many surprises, yeah. So I think one that is really that maybe stands out for me is the aspect of timing. And because there is a lot of things that you can orchestrate and organize, and really make sure that then you think everything is there, and then you have the aspect of timing. Are you not too early with your ID, for instance? And I remember also from having worked in ING, of course, for a long time in the innovation lab, that we, and maybe if people from ING are looking at this, they are maybe laughing, and they know exactly what I mean. That we had ideas that were still very high level. We had some aspirations and some ideas, and they just didn't make it. And then years later, literally years later, we all of a sudden saw those ideas. And I remember then with some colleagues who were sometimes texting each other, did you see that? That was, I don't know, that was something that we were already thinking of, but just the time wasn't right. So I think you can orchestrate all you want, but there is this aspect of timing that you just cannot influence.
Yeah,
and I think that is maybe, well, it's a surprise. It was a surprise to me. It happened to me a couple of times, and now I have learned from it that sometimes you also need to be patient, because people working in innovation, they are used to thinking far ahead. That is what they like. But you can, sometimes the timing just isn't right yet. And then you need to be patient. And that's maybe also a tip. Then never throw away your learnings. Because that's something that you learn today, and that's maybe not successful today, might be a trigger for a future initiative. And then all of a sudden, everything that you've learned today can still be applicable, or you can reuse it or use it as an input in a different way.
Yeah. I think it's related to, after so many years of working with startups in Israel, I know that there are two factors. One is like the team, which is crucial. Who are the people who are doing that? And second is really timing. They could have a great idea, and it's the market is not there yet, and it's not the right time. So they've done everything perfectly, and it doesn't work. So I think it's really important. And when you see innovation as a context, as a corporate startup, in a sense that you're trying to create something different in some cases, or change the current processes and a way of thinking, it's very, very similar in that sense. And I think that we can learn a lot from what we know about the startup world inside innovation, because it's really similar, although the context and the scene is like different
Yeah.
in a big company, it's very, very similar.
Yeah.
And could you give me like one example of a project that you've done, maybe within ING or in Explore More, that you think was very like you're very proud of it, was very special for you?
Yeah. Yeah, then I think the example that I just gave of the Eneco case, I mean, that is one that I'm really really proud of. That was so we really triggered thinking. So because it was a combination of a lot of things. It was a leadership program where we helped leaders to get insights on how innovation works, get insights on their role, and by doing that, they were able to more successfully help those innovation teams to get better. And what I really liked about it is that it was, on the one hand, very, very strategic, of course, but it was also really, really practical. And that combination, that is something that I think that is also, yeah, maybe like a little bit of my trademark, if you could say it like that, is that I am a strategic thinker. I like to oversee the big picture. But the entrepreneur in me wants to, just get working and get stuff done and bring change and make change happen.
Yes.
And
So
in this project,
give me one example. What would be a practical thing that a leader would need to know when he talks to innovation teams? Like one thing that he needs to know.
Yeah, so I think one very important one is the impact of their own opinion. And that is, I like your question because it triggers me. I have now, like I said, a flashback of a conversation that I had back then. So what happens quite often is that we all know innovation is about data. It is about learning. It is about collecting the data and not about opinions. It's about data-driven decision making. But what's happening in especially large organizations quite often is that senior leaders, and that's of course perfectly okay, they have their own opinion. But by sharing their own opinion, if they are not in the early adopter segment of a specific innovation initiative, their opinion is not worth anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and, when we create a product, we always say you're not the user, so you're not the one that we're aiming for. So maybe what you think is not exactly as what they think.
Exactly. And that's insight. And it's okay to have the opinion, but then they also need to have the understanding, okay, I understand the early adopter segment. I understand I'm not in it. I can still give my opinion, but it is not valuable data for this innovation initiative. And then on the other hand, the people in the team, and I've seen this happening so many times, they also need to be bold, right? They also need to have the guts then to tell the senior leader, thank you for your opinion. It's an opinion. You're not in my early adopter segment. So I'm going to put it aside and we're going to talk about the data. We're doing validated learning. That is, for me, the core of what innovation is about. And that means that you stick to the data and don't let yourself be, distracted by information that is, of course, good to know. You need to understand what your stakeholders, your senior leaders think about your initiative, but don't mix it up with the data.
Yeah. So, I think innovation, as you said, is like a series of experiments, and sometimes they fail and we learn and we go to the next one. And it's a bit different when a big organization is less like aware of the fact that you need to learn while failing, and they're trying to avoid failures. And another thing that is related to what you said, is the power dynamics within the company and how powerful it is.
Yes.
Because if the power dynamics is so is controlling everything, so you cannot be really creative and to express your thoughts, and which is very important. And
Yes.
how
and I think that is something that as an and that's also now what I'm sometimes doing when I'm working with companies. I notice I can give an outside in perspective and give my honest opinion, and I'm not a threat to people. So remember in the beginning when you were asking me the question, what I liked and what is different about it. Now I talk to those senior leaders and I show them the mirror of what is happening if they give their opinion and it's not relevant. And me saying that as an and of course I can do that, but I can just do that by sharing my own personal lessons in a nice way without attacking people or anything. I'm just sharing that as an insight that I had, and then you see that people start thinking about it. Okay, so they sometimes not always mention that, but they say, oh yeah, okay, I recognize what you're saying. I need to be mindful of when I give my opinion, how I give it, and how this is valued or helping the data that this innovation team is collecting.
I think that like most of my career was an outside consultant, and I always think that it's first, it's not like you can say you're paid to say what you think, so which is a big difference. And the second thing is that you're not suspected in any sense that you have like you're connected to someone, you're part of the politics. You sat with someone at lunch and you would like to work with him more or whatever. Like it's very clear to everyone that you came from a very clean point of view. And it's only your professional point of view, which is really important. And then I think that in innovation, after you're in an organization, sometimes it's hard to change because it's like you're fighting all the time to create something which is not here yet. And when you come from the outside, it's much easier for you because you don't have the barriers, even in your mind, that you have as someone from the inside, which is really makes sense. And if let's say an innovation leader would come to you and would say, okay, we're in the middle of this crisis and we're cutting costs on innovation, what would be like the first reaction you will give him?
So my first reaction would be that it is a understandable and reflex of a corporate to do so, but that this organization then also, and this leader also needs to be aware of the fact that if you look, for instance, back to the financial crisis in the 2000s, and I've seen the research actually done by the Erasmus University. Yes, on the short term, if you cut down on the cost, this might be have a even better or positive influence on your share on the market. But if you look longer term, it's going to backfire. So that is what I would say. Keep that in mind. Keep in mind, although it's understandable, although the pressure is there, keep in mind that on the long term, it pays off if you keep investing in innovation for your people, for your organization, and also towards your shareholders.
I think it's related to what we said in the past, like that you need to see what's going on right now, and you need to have the vision, and there is tension between these two. And which one would you say? Like I'm protecting my core, I'm going back to my core, or I'm thinking about what I could do, or what are the opportunities out there that this crisis may hold.
Exactly. And actually, in general, I think companies always need to be ready to reinvent themselves. And that means that you keep investing in innovation. And a crisis, as we are seeing today, is making that need even more apparent for for everyone, I would say. It's and you now literally see it, of course. There are organizations that are in that situation already, that they have to, because their existing business model simply doesn't work anymore. And then how successful they will be depends on whether or not they have the flexibility and the agility and the open mind to be able to reinvent themselves on the spot. Because if you then start building your innovation capabilities, you're too late, right?
Right. It's like an insurance. To do innovation is like an insurance. You need to do it and pay all the time. And when you have the opportunities, you just catch them. But it's not something that you do while you're within a crisis and start there.
No.
And we know that now we surely know that it's unexpected, and it could be a very wide change that you did not even perceive, and it's really fast. And I think that many companies, like you could take like I know sports and tourists related and hotels, for example, and then flights. They are like the first ones to suffer. But I think that maybe in a year or two, we'll see many other sub impacts going on companies, and then it will not be only related to exactly what's going on in COVID. It's related to the financial stats. It's related the way that the customers are perceiving what they're doing and what they're doing with your company. So, and I think it's related to what we said about the growth mindset, because if you have the ability to think differently and to perceive things with flexibility, you'll be able to do this change. And if you have never learned how to do it, now it's like it's only threatening for you.
I know. And that's exactly the difference. Going back to the research that we talked about before, this is the difference that I see between the reflex of these organizations. It depends on there is, if people are interested, they can reach out to me. I can send them the research and the details. What they will see there is that companies that are more mature in their innovation capabilities, they were less affected by the crisis. And this is, of course, still short term, right? Then the effect now, you can only measure the effect on their existing reaction of today. But if you go back to the data of the financial crisis that was there already in the 2000s, I have seen research indicating that the same situation was there back then. And these companies that kept investing in innovation, they are better off today.
Yeah. So and because we say like innovation is experimentation and change, and getting ready for change and being like resistant in the way we perceive change, it's not surprising, because a crisis is just a very big change, and if you're ready for small changes, you might be more ready for a bigger one. So I want to thank you for your time. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And if people would like to reach out and ask you things and maybe contact you, where would that be?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, but also if they go to my website, which is www.exploremore.nl, and explore more is with an X, so not with an E. They can find all contact information, drop me an email, give me a call. If they want to know more about the research that I did, I can send them a summary. If they're interested in what my company is doing, they can have a look. Also, I'm connected to the Erasmus University, where I, together with them, have set up a program for innovation leaders, or people who really think innovation is their profession and want to mature personally. It's called the Leading Innovation Excellence Program. It's at the Erasmus University. And if they want to know more about it, just drop me a line. I'm one of the guest lecturers there and also coaching people throughout the program. So happy to share about that as well.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Really, maybe next time we'll talk about that further.
Yeah.
So I'd like to thank you all for viewing and listening to this episode. And if you liked it, you're welcome to try out and listen more in the Invisible Innovation Show and podcast. And thank you, and we'll see you next time.